Welcome to Raptors Weekly for the week of June the 15th. Midway through June, then you got July, then you got August, then you got September, and then in October you got training camp. So we're not that far off, are we, Will?
We're pretty far off.
Oh, we are, right?
Yeah, there's more things coming.
We're like pre-draft. It's early. It's way early.
Yeah, super dead.
The NBA Finals are going on. Come on, man. The season hasn't even ended yet.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. The finals are cool, I guess.
Yeah, they're
not
cool
as a Raptors fan.
Nah. The finals are fun. The finals are at 2-2, and I called Cleveland in 6, and I'm going to stick to that. I thought Golden State would win their home game, Game 5, but they won Game 4. So you know what? No biggie. LeBron's got this.
You think so? He's got another 40, 12, and 10, or whatever he's doing right now.
Yeah, too bad he can't take like 2 weeks off and go to Florida and come back for games 5, 6, and 7, eh?
You know, if he could, I'd have the Cavs in 6 as well. But he looks exhausted, man. That guy looks exhausted. Dellavedova, I don't know. The magic is fading. We'll say that. Okay.
Yeah.
Striking midnight.
Yeah. Well, let's get some Raptors talk. And this week there were a couple of items of news. Dwane Casey came out and gave his first official interview, I think, to the Fan 590, and had a lot to say. And you kind of covered this for the site and had a lot of quotes on there. And one of the ones that was interesting to me was how he had no doubt that he would retain his job. He didn't fear for it for a second. Do you believe that?
No, but I mean, like, what's he supposed to say? Yeah, I was super worried for my job. Yeah, he has to put on a brave face, obviously. And quite honestly, I think he should coach like he doesn't have worry for that. Like he actually doesn't have worry for the job. You know, like you just do you. And if it's not what the Raptors want, then sorry, Casey, you're gone. So.
Yeah, he came out and he had a lot of positive quotes. He focused on what the organization had achieved last season. 49 wins. Sometimes that gets lost by the wayside given the playoff exit, but it was a successful season from a regular season perspective, even though the second half of the season was a bit shitty. And we saw some player development. So there's a positive outlook for the team, I feel, to some degree. And PhD Steve and his podcast covered that well last week. Or earlier this week. So the Raptors are in a good position, and Casey returning, I don't know how I feel about that, man. I just felt that, the lack of preparation at the playoffs was almost damning, and I'm a bit surprised that he came back, but I think we've talked about it. It's more than just what the fans want. It's about the financial aspect of things, and it would be kind of odd to fire a guy after a 49-win season, even though the fans kind of want some blood given the way the playoffs ended.
Yeah, I mean, just the optics of it will look a bit awkward. Like you're saying, like from a general NBA-wide standpoint, you look at Toronto. This is a franchise high number of wins, and then you look at the talent on the roster, and you see it's not like there's like multiple superstars or whatever on the roster, and Casey's kind of like fudging it up, So yeah, from that perspective, I don't know. I mean, the biggest thing with Casey is feels like he needs to get all the players to buy in. Before next season, which is it's kind of odd that you would, as a longtime head coach, and you're going to preach continuity, but at the same time, it seems like the thing he has to get is everyone on the same page with him again, which is kind of opposite to continuity. But whatever, he's here.
Yeah, and there's some, in the post-season press conferences after they got eliminated, a lot of players came out in support of the coach, and the only odd comment that kind of stuck out was Kyle Lowry when he said, like, I think something like, there's some internal problems or whatever that we got to deal with. And other than that, granted, it's from Kyle Lowry, who's your star player. Other than that, I didn't really sense much. But just the fact that Kyle Lowry said that, I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, it's awkward, especially because Lowry has a history of kind of being a coach killer. Or not a coach killer, but like someone who clashes with coaches. Yeah. Which, Lowry is like a very, very stubborn guy. So.
The thing with Lowry is that he's not a coach killer. He's not good enough to be a coach killer. If he was like a first-tier talent, yeah, exactly. Like he's a coach killer because he was really good at one point, and he clashed with the coach. And when it came between the coach and him, the franchise chose him. So I don't think Lowry's.
The Jazz chose Darren Williams over fucking Jerry Sloan. Like,
yeah,
that's how good he used to be.
Yeah. Anyway. Darren Williams was a tier 1 point guard at some point. So welcome back, Dwane Casey, I guess. Even though last week's pod, Andrew mentioned that that might be Masai's biggest mistake of bringing Casey back. But I guess we'll see. What's the worst that can happen? He'll get fired after 17 games.
It's possible.
Yeah.
It looks like a Sam Mitchell situation almost.
It does.
Yeah.
And I think he deserves another shot. So give it to him. But this time on a much shorter lease. If the season goes south in the first 20 games, then then Masai might have to take some action. But hey, well, let's worry about that later, man.
Yeah.
I know you wanted to talk about some Masai criticism that's been happening on the web. That's kind of bothering you, Will. So lay down on the Raptors Weekly couch and tell me about it.
I just don't see why, if you look at Masai's, 2-year tenure at the Raptors, logically, I just don't see why some fans are angry with him. There's this building resentment towards him because, I don't know, somehow the Raptors are this treadmill team, which is very strange because, okay, yeah, they won, around 50 games for 2 years. So I guess that's technically a treadmill team. But I mean, you got to take into account where he started with this team. We're talking about his first move was amnestying Linus Kleza. We had Linus Kleza on this roster. And then he dealt Bargnani, which was the fucking cornerstone at the time. And, he re-signed all the Raptors' key free agents. I mean, that's definitely not something that's easy for this Raptors franchise. So, I mean, honestly, retaining Dwane Casey and Gravis Vasquez, which is something we said last week, were his worst moves. I mean, in a vacuum, that's pretty good. That means you're doing a lot of good things here. And you look at the D-League team that he's brought here. I just don't see why some fans have started to turn on Masai Ujiri. I think it's kind of frustrating when you, as a fan, you want to see a lot of things happen. You don't like to be preached patience. And if you are preached patience, you want to see a linear path, a tanking philosophy. Sam Hinkie can preach patience, and I guess Sixer fans can buy into it. But, with Masai, it's a little bit more nebulous. But at the same time, just look at his resume. He's done a lot of great things here. There's no reason to believe he's not going to continue to do good things. The Raptors cap sheet is very healthy. It's clean. It's, for the future. There are some young pieces. Some of them have stalled out a little bit. But at the same time, this team is still young with potential. It's a weak East, but, they've had 2 pretty successful seasons. And there's no indications that, him and MLSE are, at odds or whatever. I mean, someone on the forums was saying some shit has Masai become the MLSE's lapdog? I don't even know where that would even come from. Why would anyone think that? So, I mean, I can see why people are pissed off with, the way the season ended, but I don't see why any of that has to fall on Masai. So.
I think that's it, right? I mean, I think people are still really angry about the way the season ended. It's just it was so abrupt and shocking that you just were was that all for nothing? I look at it in a slightly different way. I'm if you every GM that comes in, you could be some GMs that come in and do a clear out. And they just start fresh from day one. He hasn't done that. He's adopted a bit of a wait and see approach. And if you look at the last 2 years as his, learning game, his wait and see approach, in those 2 years, the Raptors have done quite well. They made the playoffs 2 seasons in a row. They've won 49 games. So if you just consider this just his taking stock period, it's not bad for a taking stock period. It's 2 playoff appearances for, granted, in a weak East, but, higher seeds, excitement in the fan base, good performances on the court overall. Granted, yeah, the second half of the season kind of sucked. And he's now in a position, as you said, the cap is healthy. He's got options. Yeah, there's competition for free agents. But even after 2 years of just trying to fix the cap, trying to get, re-sign some free agents, trying to just understand what he has on his on the roster, he still managed to make the playoffs 2 seasons in a row and inject some fan excitement. Keep in mind, the Raptors weren't making the playoffs before Ujiri got here. So when people complain about the Raptors being a treadmill team, that's actually a huge step up than what they're normally accustomed to. So you could take the positive spin on this and say, yeah, you got to be a treadmill team before you get to the next level. I don't know if there are many teams that go from 20 wins to NBA finals. Even the Golden State Warriors you see in the finals, they went through a period where they could be considered a treadmill team who didn't have enough, oomph on the roster to actually pull through, but now they got it. So maybe this is part of the evolution of a team. And yeah, we don't have the superstars that Golden State has or some of those teams have, but that's a process, and maybe you get one this summer, maybe next summer. It's a journey, not like a overnight thing. And sometimes fans just, as I said, I think it's the playoff exit just hurts, man.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think as a fan, it's easier. It's all about expectations. I think with sports fandom, like if you have a linear thing like a tanking rebuild, like a rebuild / tank, like that is a very linear path to, or at least how it's supposed to be, But Masai hasn't really done that. But at the same time, you can't fault him for not doing that, because like, why would you have done that after last season? Last season looked great, and then he re-signed all the guys that were integral to their success last season, made a few small additions, and I don't know. I mean, the team didn't really take a giant step forward, but at the same time, there's still opportunities to add pieces. Like treadmill team, I guess, was kind of a term popularized to describe like the late 2000 and the Hawks. But that Hawks team, like they capped themselves out and they had no, ability to add more talent through, signings or whatever. The Raptors have cap space this summer, and honestly, if they just blow all that cap space and I don't know, re-sign Jonas and Terrence Ross to long extensions and just fill that up, which I don't know, I don't really see a reason for that, at least immediately. Then yeah, maybe we can talk about this being a treadmill team. But I mean, we haven't got to that point yet, and there's a lot of options available, and he's done a lot of good things. Like one thing I like about GMs, or the way I evaluate GMs is like, can they maximize assets? Can they increase value in terms of what they have, in terms of trades, in terms of development, whatever. And you look at how much value and how many assets were on the Raptors when he took over in 2013. They were short picks. There were a pick deficit. There was a lot of middling talent on the roster. And you look at now, they actually have appealing trade pieces. They have a healthy cap sheet. They have extra picks going forward. Like, I don't know how much more you want.
The thing with the word treadmill is that it implies that the roster is stuck. They can't go up. They can't go down because they're in a position where they're just in this equilibrium where they can't move. And as you said, the Raptors don't have that. They aren't stuck. They got a lot of agility on the roster in terms of cap space and personnel. It's not like they're carrying duds, man. You look at 1 to 5, Lowry, Jameer Johnson, DeRozan, like everybody except maybe Terrence Ross. They all have value. Like they are players that other teams would want on their team. That you couldn't say about previous versions of the Raptors where you had Anthony Parker like middling away at the end of his career and things like those. We have both agility in terms of cap space and actual roster. So there's a lot of possibilities the Raptors have at their disposal this summer in what they want to do. And Masai really has a lot of flexibility and a lot of options in what he has to do. And that's a little exciting as a fan. Now it's obviously a question of what he does with that. And that's, let's wait for July 1st to see that. But yeah, I totally disagree on the whole treadmill thing, like this early into Masai's thing. Like we're not a treadmill team. We have room for improvement, and we could all fuck it up in the summer and go all the way down. We don't know that, but that's a TBD. We can't just label the Raptors a treadmill team, even though we haven't had playoff success over the last 2 seasons. To me, that's part process, and maybe as part of that process, I felt that a coaching upgrade was needed. Didn't happen, but that's not the end of the world. There's a lot of other levers the Raptors can push to make themselves go higher.
Yeah, that's why we say that bringing back Casey for next year might be his worst move of his tenure. And if you look at it in a vacuum, that's a pretty positive sign for Masai's tenure as GM, because all things considered, bringing back Dwane Casey isn't like the worst thing in the world, So.
All right, so let's go on, man. Some other news that came out this week was the Raptors free agent minicamp, which kind of already happened, but the roster was a bit interesting for this one. It was a closed door. It happened on Friday and Saturday, and one of the guys, I know you want to talk about the unfortunately named Scrubb brothers, but one name that caught my eye was Tyrus Thomas. He's still hanging around after being drafted, I think, 4th overall by the Blazers, shipped to Chicago. A power forward, really didn't ever develop a jump shot, but had a lot of talent. But he's on the roster, and I know the Raptors have a a need at the power forward spot. I don't know how good Tyrus Thomas is. Apparently, he had some spinal cord nerve issues, which never sounds good, but he's fought through it. And based on the quotes that are coming from his camp, he seems pretty motivated to come back. He's only 28. I don't know what's gonna become of him, but I'm kind of hoping that he's the Hassan Whiteside that we don't pass on. So Tyrus Thomas, welcome to Raptors free agent camp. Let's see what you got, man, because we need a 6'10" guy at power forward who can do shit. But maybe it's him. Probably not. But what do you think about Tyrus Thomas?
I mean, you said the phrase "he's only 28" about an NBA prospect. Like, I honestly, Tyrus Thomas, if he could just like put aside all the personality issues, he'd be a very, very desirable NBA player. Like, you could see him sort of fulfilling that. I don't know necessarily Whiteside. I think that's obviously like very, very positive, but like something like Larry Sanders, or even like, just a serviceable third or fourth big off the bench. I mean, he certainly has the physical tools for it. I mean, you're not giving him the ball and telling him to make plays like Blake Griffin, but he should be able to do things like defend the rim. He's always a good shot blocker and stuff. And I mean, there were some positive quotes. He had some very, very, I'd say like honest quotes about himself and why he ended up in the situation. He talked about how the NBA is a family, and as soon as you build a reputation for being, a slacker, a guy with personality issues, it sticks with you for a very long time, and it's very hard to shed that. And quite honestly, that's kind of what happened with Tyrus Thomas. So, I mean, if he makes a comeback and, those things are behind him, then that'd be great. And honestly, he'd fill a need for the Raptors. He could play backup center, for example. So
yeah, that was my whole point, is that the quotes that are coming from his camp, it really feels like he's changed his personality, or he's at least recognized what was the problem with him before. And for a lot of guys, it takes time to get there. For him, it probably took too long. But let's see what he's got. And like one thing that always stuck with me is I think it was Jonathan Givony from Draft Express, and who wrote an article, and he was interviewing some GMs, and he said the most important part of the combine process, they have like 1,000 videos on Draft Express about players and so on, but the most important part of that from a GM's perspective is the interview. It's not so much what your vertical is, what your wingspan is, it's how well do you perform in your interview, and that can kind of raise your stock by 7-8 picks just if you interview well. And it speaks to GMs really looking more and more for guys who really have it, who got it mentally, or who know what it takes, both from a maturity and seriousness perspective, to make it to the league. And clearly Tyrus Thomas is one of those guys that probably didn't perform as great in those sessions. And but I think if you interview him today versus if you interview him when he was 19, I think you'll see a much different person. And I've just been researching him for the last hour or so. So it sounds good, but let's not get our hopes too high.
Yeah. And like you said, there's some other interesting names. The two that stuck out to me are Phil and Thomas Scrubbs. That's a very unfortunate last name, but at the same time, they are the exact opposite of Scrubbs. The two of them dominated as members of Carleton, the Carleton Ravens, in the CIS. Now, many people shit on the CIS, and I think rightfully so. It is a lower standard of competition, but at the same time, Carleton is the exception. They have been compared. They have played NCAA Division I teams many times. They've destroyed them. There's tons of features written about their head coach Dave Smart and their program, and how great Carleton is, and how fortunate the CIS to have this crown jewel there that's so dominant. And at the core of that, in the last 5 years, has been the Scrubb brothers. They're both pretty good shooters. They're both wing players. Phil's 6'5". Thomas is 6'5". Phil is 6'2". Of the two, I think Phil's the more interesting prospect. He shot 47% from deep over his 5-year career at Carleton, which is just insane. And he can also handle the ball a little bit. I'd say he's a poor man's version of Nick Stauskas, which, I mean, I don't know. Stauskas went 8th in last year's draft. So I'm not saying that Phil Scrubbs is as good as Stauskas, but at the same time, he feels, that same profile. And they seem like pretty good, hardworking players. what the Raptors director of scouting, Dan Tolzman, had some very, very positive things to say about both Scrubbs and also the CIS. And so with the Raptors getting a D-League team possibly starting next year, and it's going to be here in Canada, I see no reason why, if they have the opportunity, why they shouldn't sign both Scrubbs brothers as D-League free agents to the D-League team, and then see how they'd work. And honestly, if the Raptors need a guy and for a 10-day or whatever, bring those guys up. It's great. It's not just because they're Canadian. It's because they have great tools. Both are great three-point shooters. They both know how to play. And honestly, it'd be a great story if some like actual homegrown Canadian talent, like two Canadian guys who actually played in like Canadian systems all the way throughout, where he's somehow able to make his Canada's lone team. So, yeah.
Well, that's on Scrub. So clearly, Will is very into the Scrub brothers. I'm going to pick another guy that I've kind of seen some YouTube clips of, who I kind of like, and it's Australian guy Ryan Broekhoff. I think he played in Besiktas last year, and good shooter, good size at 6'7". He shot 50% in like a bunch of games last season. Like that was his seasonal average, shooting 50% from three. Granted, it was in Turkey and in the Euro Cup and whatnot, but over 16 games he shot 50%. He was 36 of 72. And the one thing that I firmly believe that translates from wherever you're playing to wherever you're playing is rebounding and three-point shooting. Like if you can shoot and you got a quick release, it'll translate to wherever you go, as long as you play in a half-decent system. So if the Raptors want to extend the court or stretch the court, and they don't want to spend too much money on there, a guy like him might be a steal, or at least might be some value. And I was writing this article, which is going to come on the site, I think by Tuesday or so, about cheap free agents. And I was looking at Marco Bellinelli, being a three-point shooter. I was looking at Mike Dunleavy's on that list as well. But they all cost a little bit of money, like $3-4 million at least. But if you can get a guy off the free agent camp who can shoot, I think that's somebody you can stash as the 10th man on the roster and like even use once in a while.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have no idea who this Ryan Broekhoff guy is, but I mean, if he's good,
yeah,
why not, right?
And you got to have an Australian these days on the roster, otherwise that's just one of those things you got to do.
That's just facts. I mean, look at it. Both teams in the NBA Finals both have an Australian.
There you go. Get David Anderson back. Remember David Anderson?
That's right. He's still playing.
He's still somewhere. He's hanging around. Yeah. We also had I talked to that Australian reporter from Perth, I think, a few weeks back, and he named me a bunch of Australian players that are still in the league. I didn't even know half of them. But yeah, David Anderson is still playing around.
Kyrie Irving?
Yeah, not really though.
Technically born there.
Not really. Nah, he's not from Australia. Who are we kidding?
Dante Exum. There we go.
Yeah, Dante Exum.
Oh, and Joe Ingles.
Joe Ingles, yes, correct.
Yeah.
Hey man, let's take a quick break, and we're going to come back. We're going to talk about some fishing. Welcome back to Raptors Weekly, Part 2. I can't believe we're getting a podcast out with nothing going on. But hey, man, that's the art of doing a podcast, is talking about nothing, but actually talking about something. And that something up next is Tom Sterner, who has finally broken the silence after he was canned by the Raptors. Unfairly, I might add, after 4 years of service. I think he was one of the only, correct me if I'm wrong, Will, holdover from the Triano era in terms of assistant coaches, other than the medical guy, I think.
No, I think McKechnie was also a new hire.
Oh, there you go. So Tom Sterner, the only link to the previous era, was canned, and he gave a couple of quotes to TSN, and very thankful, very grateful, praised the Raptor fans, directly compared them to Golden State, and said they were better, and said he'd been to Golden State, and the Raptor fans are clearly better. Really, man, I mean, judging by his quotes, you'd think he got promoted and not fired by the Raptors. But that's what it is, right? He's looking for a new job, and the last thing you want to do is slag off your old employer. So totally understood by Tom Sterner. So Will, do you want to speculate on what Tom Sterner's next career move will be?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully he can get another coaching job, but I don't know. If he doesn't get another coaching job, however, and based on his comments, he seems to really love being in Toronto. I would love to see him as a TSN analyst, but not just as any analyst. I don't want him to sit on the stupid panel and talk to fucking Jack Armstrong. Well, I guess you Jack's nice. I like Jack. Or talk to Leo and Gurdeep, whatever, on the halftime broadcast where they talk about Tristan Thompson and how great of an Canadian he is. I want Tom Sterner in that Steve Javy role that ABC has him on right now.
It's too limited, though. It's too limited.
No, that's what I mean. We need Sterner in like concentrated doses.
Yeah.
Like if we have Sterner every day, then it'll wear off on us. He'll just blend into the background. We won't love him anymore. But if he's like a Steve Javy role where like he's kept in a room full of electronics, a dark room, he's always the same room, wearing always the same clothing.
It's got to be dark.
It's part of the production. And you just cut to Tom Sterner, after halftime, ask him like, all right, let's pretend like you're still coaching the Raptors. How would you fire this team up? And just have him give his, do his regular stuff, but in like very, very short 30-second bursts. I think Twitter will go crazy about it. We all know that the Raptors fan base loves Tom Sterner, and I don't know. I mean, TSN could really use a boost with their broadcast, so get on it.
And for added effect, it has to be done over FaceTime. It has to.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, a shaky camera.
Exactly. It's got the camera from the Saw. Like that. That's what you need here.
Definitely. Just adds to the craziness.
Yeah. Yeah, I love Tom Sterner. I think you're right. I think if he just be the regular guy at the end of quarter or whatever it is, I think he'd get annoying. But in concentrated doses, as you said, Will, I can see that. I don't know if any NBA team does that. I remember Fox NFL Sunday started that with that referee expert like in the New York office, and they kind of fired him up every time there was like a 4th down and 1, and they used to wire him in. But and then the NBA started doing that with Javy. But yeah, I don't think if any local production team does that in the NBA, so the Raptors would be a first there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it also has to be a pretty tough, run of it for Sterner if that's the best gig you can get, which is to be locked in a room and shown for like a minute at a time. But I mean, I don't know. It's the fans will love it. He's a called hero already.
Yeah. Let's also talk about Mo Pete here. A lot of criticism about Mo Pete's performance this season as a color analyst, and I mean, as soon as you listen to him, you understand why it is. He really doesn't have much to say. It's very bland. It's not very insightful at all. But at the same time, I'm not willing to give up on him. I think he still got it in him. He played a long NBA career, and he probably has a lot of stories back there, man. I think he just has to work on being a little more open, being a little more Mo Pete, and not what he expects people to be. He just got to be himself, and I think he'll be just fine. I think Mo Pete has a future in broadcasting, even though the evidence so far might suggest that he's just too bumbly to actually make it.
He just seems really nice. Doesn't really say anything of substance. It seems really scripted. Like he's really nervous, and I guess that makes sense. I don't remember too much of Mo Pete on broadcast. So hopefully more experience can get Mo Pete to develop his game as a broadcaster. But honestly, all I want on Mo Pete is just for him to tell stories. It's like a dead period in the second quarter. Gravis Vasquez is shooting it up and scoring 10 points in a row. And, I want Mo Pete to cut in there with the story about Vasquez reminds me of another Maryland product, Juan Dixon. Let me tell you about Juan Dixon in 2007. Like I would have all day, all the time in the world for Mo Pete to just interrupt the broadcast and just tell stories about, because Mo Pete transcended a lot of great Raptors eras. And I think those are the eras that at least most of the hardcore fans, miss. Oddly enough, even though they were, I think, somehow oddly enough more painful than they are right now. And for some of the newer fans, it's a way to, learn about the Raptors history. It's better than those stupid little commercials that they do where Dwane Casey goes like, "Oh yeah, I remember that game. We flew overseas to London and we lost in overtime to the Nets." Like, who cares?
The Zarar height of celebration.
That's right. Bargnani had 36.
Yeah.
And they lost.
Totally see them. I remember reading this article this week about Robert Ory. He wrote for the Players Tribune, which is a great site, by the way. It's just players telling stories. That's all it is. It's not.
It's a great idea.
That's all it is. It's just guys telling what used to happen back in the day, and it's so insightful. It's such a fresh perspective, and I'm just surprised more broadcast teams aren't taking advantage of that model and just getting guys on and just giving us some insight. I think TNT and ESPN do a good job of that, inside tracks, and sometimes they kind of cover things that really I thought are surprising to cover because they almost give up like inside information sometimes. The way players talk to coaches, how coaches talk to players. You really get a sense of what kind of personality some people have, and that kind of access is what I value when I watch the NBA or read about the NBA. So get Mo Pete in here and like go story time with Mo Pete instead of a halftime interview. You know what I mean?
Yeah, who would love that? Everybody would tune in for that. And then you have brief commercial breaks of Tom Sterner yelling at the screen.
Yeah.
Like at a shaky camera. Like,
yeah, it's amazing.
There you go, TSN.
We're just giving them gold. If they listen to this podcast, just take this, go to the producer, boom, send us the commission.
That's right.
So that's that. There's also some other news, and that's this is not news. Why are we calling it news? This is not news. No. But something happened. And it was on video. It was Bebe and Bruno. Do you want to describe what's going on here, Will, in this video that they released on Instagram?
Okay. I feel like most people have played Pokemon a little bit and are familiar with the Pokemon Magikarp. So what happens is Bebe... You don't know Magikarp?
I don't know, but go ahead.
Okay. So it's Bebe and Bruno. It looks like they're done practice or whatever, workouts for the day, and they're in the Raptors locker room by themselves. I mean, obviously there's someone shooting and filming the whole thing. They're shirtless. Bebe's standing upright, and he's sort of like reeling it in, doing a reel motion, like a fishing reel motion. And there's Bruno on the ground, planking basically, but also flopping and eventually making his way towards Bebe. Kind of like a Magikarp would if it used Splash repeatedly.
Yeah.
This is the future. I think the guy who was filming was DeAndre Daniels, but
yeah. So there you go, guys. That's our trio for the future. And,
this is news as well.
Yeah, this is great news. So what do we know about these two so far? Like, do we know anything about these two from a basketball perspective? I know they come up on the podcast once in a while, and we kind of give them a minute here, a minute there, and we should give them a minute here as well, no more than that. But Bruno, like your impressions after, I don't know, man. I mean, he had he played 23 minutes, and then he had a couple of D-League stints. Now, what's there to say about the guy except nothing?
Yeah, that's the crazy part. Like, I think this is the biggest reason as to why we should get a D-League team. Like, as hardcore Raptors fans, we're as hardcore as it comes. But if you asked us to write out a scouting report for Bruno or Bebe or DeAndre Daniels, I guess DeAndre Daniels, if we really cared enough, we could have watched some Perth Wildcats games. But I mean, fuck that. Like, if we were asked to fill out a scouting report for these two, like, we would have nothing on there other than they're Brazilian, they're long, and they're really silly, and they spend apparently all their time together, right? I mean, like, Bruno, and it's kind of jarring. Like, I don't know anything about Bruno. I mean, I suppose he could shoot threes, kind of, but at the same time, like, we don't have a lot of evidence about that. We don't know if he can handle the ball or not. We don't know how. Man.
Like, I saw the D-League. There's D-League evidence. There's D-League evidence which says that he does not know basketball. It's a secret, but he does not know basketball.
Yeah, that's really concerning, right? Like, I mean, there might be a lot of upside, sure, but I don't think we should confuse rawness with upside necessarily. Like,
it's just so unknown. It's just he's long. Yeah, that's great. I still think we could have used him on some inbound plays this year. I don't care if you are. You just go in there, wave your arms, flail your arms.
Yeah, but what happens when after the inbound comes in, he actually has to defend? Like,
yeah, he could. Come on, put him on somebody. I'm sure he can find a way.
Yeah,
can't be that.
I don't know. I mean, I have hope for these two. In fact, actually, I have slightly more hope for Bebe right now than Bruno, just because. I mean, out of the stuff that we've seen from Bebe, like, there's a little bit more D-League clips of him and stuff. And overseas, he played with, I think, the Turkish league, and he won Defensive Player of the Year. Like, I don't know. He's long. He played
lanky. In Spain, didn't he? He played in Spain.
Oh, Spain?
Estudiantes,
okay. Yeah. I don't know. I mean,
he's got what I know about Bebe is this, that if you throw him a lob and, there's a guy around him, he's able to catch that lob and kind of finish. That's about it. That's what he showed in D-League, basically. And he's got a lot of... I guess this comes with youth. He's got a lot of tries in his offensive rebounds. Like, he's got, recover. What's the word? Like, when he jumps and the other guy jumps too, he jumps quicker the second time. So he's able to like jump more than once while the other guy's still like gathering for the second jump, and he can get a lot of offensive rebounds that way. That's one thing I noticed in D League from him. I don't know about in the NBA, but he's got that in him. And I remember like one guy who used to get rebounds. One guy who used to have that kind of that kind of skill was Jamario Moon, who used to continually get beat on defense, but somehow had the recoverability to still contest for the shot. He annoyed me to no end because he gambled so much on defense, but for some reason he was long enough and quick enough that he could always recover, and things weren't as bad as he had made them like 10 seconds ago. he was one of those players, and Bebe kind of reminds me in a different sense of that kind of player who uses his athletic ability to kind of get an advantage. So there's that, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, I really hope that these two could be something. It baffles me that Bebe at age 22 can't get a single second of floor time.
Yeah.
When I watch Clint Capella, for example, I'm just like, why can't Bebe be doing this? I mean, Capella, all things considered, actually looked pretty impressive in the playoffs. It looks pretty fluid as an athlete, whereas Bebe looks a little bit more clunky. But I don't know. I mean, you would like to see them to do something. And hopefully next year when the D-League comes, if it does come, we get to actually see these players and actually get to know the players. Like, what can they actually do? Because right now, I honestly don't know anything about them except that they're long and they're Brazilian.
Yeah, and last year, backup center was a position of need too. And if you can't crack a lineup in a year where Tyler Hansbrough was like option 2, I don't know what that says. But again, hey man, we're willing to give them a lot of line right now. That's a fishing reference, by the way.
Nice.
Okay.
Nice.
Finally, let's we kind of touched on this, but let's talk about NBA Finals here. It's 2-2 right now. The podcast is being recorded late on Saturday night, believe it or not. And it's 2-2. Golden State kind of blew Cleveland out in that fourth quarter. How are you feeling about this series right now? You think LeBron's got enough to at least steal one more game, maybe, Will?
Can he steal one more? I think so, yeah.
Well, if he can steal one, he can steal two.
Sure. I mean, it's frustrating, the series, because LeBron is like this weird, because like on paper you look at this Cavs team, like without LeBron this current Cavs team would be like the Knicks, like, and I mean no disrespect to Mozgov, I mean no disrespect to Tristan Thompson or Matthew Dellavedova or Shumpert or whatever,
them, though, yeah.
They're just not very good.
Disrespect, yeah.
They're just not very good players. They're all like limited role players, and you know what? Some of them have actually played their roles tremendously, like Tristan Thompson, Dellavedova, Mozgov. They've done great, but like the sheer fact, like, is that the Warriors are so much better than the Cavaliers, or they should be, and the fact that LeBron has taken 2 wins by taking over like 70% of the Cavaliers' possessions. Like, just think about that. When have you ever seen a player take that much of the workload for his team and actually beat a very, 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 very impressive team like the Warriors are? Like, it's crazy. But at the same time, every game I basically expect the Warriors to win because on paper they're so much better.
The only guy who I remember in recent memory who took over NBA Finals like this with the amount of shots and amount of dominance, he never won it though, but he did try it, is Allen Iverson back against the Lakers. I think he was the Philly offense at the time. And obviously things didn't work for him at the time, but it reminds you of that. And the one observation that I had about the series is that the way Cleveland's playing offense is actually helping their defense, because right now it's basically a 1-4 clear out every time on the left side. And what that does is the other 4 guys on Cleveland are basically either hitting the offensive rebounds, mostly Tristan Thompson, but the other 3 are essentially running back. And Golden State has no fast break game just because the other 3 guys aren't even like moving. They're just at the perimeter waiting for LeBron to do something. And it's kind of almost unknowingly, I want to add, I think the Cleveland coach has kind of done a good job in that sense. But I don't know. Yeah. I think playing one-on-one has its benefit, and it's that. And I think Cleveland's kind of reaping that, especially because Golden State likes to run so much, and they really have struggled to do that so far.
Yeah, it's a smart strategy. Like, you look at Dellavedova and you look at these guys, like, their effort on defense is like insane. Like, they're going all out on every single possession, and you got to think that LeBron literally handling every single possession and is allowing the rest of the players to actually rest especially for a very limited 7-man roster. To give these guys rest even while they're on the court so that they can give it their all on defense. I mean, it's very impressive, but at the same time, like, you look at any other player in the NBA, no other player would be able to shoulder this kind of workload that LeBron is doing, which is just insane. But I don't know. I mean, the Warriors, they went to that Iguodala small starting 5, which, like, Draymond Green was the tallest guy in that lineup, and he's like 6'7", 6'8". So it's like back to Nelly ball for the Warriors, but somehow it's working. And honestly, if the Cavaliers try to adapt and, I don't know, dust off Sean Marion or Mike Miller, I think that's playing right into the Warriors' hands, because the Warriors are basically betting that, hey, our advantage on the wings / guards are better than your advantage at center and at power forward. If the Cavaliers actually go away from their power forward / center advantage, then I don't know, they're toast, really. So
yeah. Sean Marion can't see the light of day here. You can't. You can't get into an up and down game against Golden State.
Did you see that Stein report about how, or not? I don't know. Maybe it was like Windhorst or whatever. But like someone from ESPN was reporting that like some of the Cavs were upset that Blatt didn't expand the rotation. Like, are you serious? Like, you want Kendrick Perkins? Is Kendrick Perkins upset that he's not getting playing time? Like, he's like, I could take these guys, because like
some Cavs are upset. Was that Windhorst? If it's Windhorst, you can just safely ignore that shit, because he's just like putting out articles and tweets out there hoping they're right. I think he's lost favor in the Cleveland organization a little bit, and he's struggling, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, he fell out of favor with LeBron, and now he's just sort of around a lot.
Yeah. So a couple of theories that came out of the series. One was that ABC really wants Golden State to do well, or specifically they want Stephen Curry to do well, because that's the only way they can show his mom on camera. What do you think of that one, Will?
Sonia Curry is a very, very beautiful woman, despite being somewhat of an advanced age. And the Del Curry, shout out to Del Curry. He's got a great family around him.
You didn't really answer the question, but yeah.
Stephen Curry's supporting cast, you know how good that is? That's Del Curry supporting family cast, all right? Del Curry supporting family cast, as good as the Warriors supporting cast.
Mm-hmm. The other news that came out of the series is that accidentally ABC's cameras caught LeBron like adjusting his shorts, and lo and behold, there it is. LeBron's penis was basically displayed on national TV, and a couple of interesting tweets came out, and one of them was basically how shocked the person was that they didn't see Brian Windhorst at the end of that.
Brian Windhorst was probably operating the camera, because it was an awkward shot where it was like shooting straight down, like, because like it wasn't like LeBron like pulled his shorts down, like he had it at waist level. He's just like it pulled the waistband, and so the only way you could have caught a snap is if you were just happened to be looking straight down down his pants at that time.
But you gotta love the internet sleuths, the CSI internet, eh? Like they got that thing pixelated, zoomed in, like freeze frame, like all kinds of things are happening just to like. Oh my God, it's funny.
Poor LeBron. You know what? Honestly, like the LeBron hate like really bothers me. I don't understand why people hate this man. Like
people are actually comparing it to Jordan's, even though there's no evidence. I swear to God, on Reddit, I saw it. They're like, and some guy's like, it's soft. You can't compare it.
You can't compare soft length. You got to go full erect length. All right.
All right. So this was the erection section of the podcast. And I think now that we've hit this high note, we're going to sign off.
High note. We talked about Curry's mom and LeBron's dick.
Yeah. And we're going to sign off with this podcast and come back next week with another edition of Raptors Weekly, which takes us 1 week closer to training camp. Say goodbye, man. Go draft. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, we'll talk about draft
sometime. Yeah, Even though we know nothing about the draft.
Nah, I don't know anything about the draft. Yeah. I don't think Steve does either, but he's got a whole podcast dedicated to it.
No, he's got inside sources.
Yeah.
And he knows everything about the draft.
Yeah.
Listen to Steve's podcast.
Yeah, fun fact about Steve Gennaro is that he used to be a Las Vegas singer. And,
that's right. A very, very, very successful one. Like
a very successful Las Vegas singer who used to perform with some star players back in Vegas. So, yeah, Steve, shout out to you. I think that's it. We've hit another high note, and it's time to say goodbye. Will, say goodbye.
All right, goodbye.
Goodbye.